My name is Patrick Donnelly, and I'm on a mission to build better leaders. Today's episode features Air Force General Kevin Gumby Schneider, Commander of Pacific Air Forces and Air Component Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. He spent an hour with me talking about the complexities of leading a huge organization across an enormous geographic area of responsibility containing a host of potential flashpoints, including the People's Republic of China. Perhaps in no other theater is the saying, "Flexibility is the key to air power," so true. But General Schneider talks about way more than just flexibility. He shares his thoughts on adaptability, resilience, and how he's empowering warfighters in the Pacific to tackle the toughest challenges. I had never met General Schneider before this episode, but I knew what a powerful military figure he was. To sit down with him and see what a humble and thoughtful human being he is was a leadership lesson on its own. So without further ado, here's Semper Gumby. General Schneider, thank you so much for joining us on Building Better Leaders.
Patrick, honored to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Well, I tell you, it's quite an impressive thing for a brand new podcast to have leaders of your credibility and capability to join the show. So I realize your time is busy, and I'm extremely grateful that you'd take the time.
Well, happy to do it, and I know you've done a lot of work in this area already. And as I talk to the wing commanders and leaders that are sitting in Pacific Air Forces right now, I know that the connection runs deep. So happy to do this and be a part of it.
Thank you, sir. So a number of our listeners aren't real familiar with how the Air Force works necessarily, and a lot of times I think I inadvertently just use terms that my mom will say, "I have no idea what you meant by that." So let's just start with something easy, and you are the commander of Pacific Air Forces. What does that mean?
Sure, I'll try to go from big to small and work into this. As the military in the United States looks at the globe and the entirety of the area of responsibility, we have combatant commands in the joint force that have specific areas, and the U.S. Indo-PACOM Command has an area of responsibility that is roughly 52% of the Earth's surface. And if you look at that on a map, it's the west side of India to just off the west coast of the United States, from the Bering Strait all the way down to Antarctica. And I had a predecessor at PACAF that described it as Hollywood to Bollywood, polar bears to penguins. So within that 100 million square miles of Indo-PACOM's area of responsibility, there are component commands. Pacific Air Forces is the Air Force component to that. The Indo-PACOM commander gives me a number of responsibilities within that. But we have forces, about 46,000 men and women, plus their families, that are stationed at 9 different bases, from Alaska to Hawaii to Guam to Japan to Korea, operating hundreds of aircraft, predominantly fighters, although there are some others, in that area. And we are responsible for providing options to the combatant commander, Admiral Paparo, and back up to the president for ensuring peace and stability in this critical region.
Wow, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I think I've got a lot on my plate. I can't imagine what you must feel when you wake up.
I say this with all sincerity. I love what I do, and I love coming to work because the teams, and there's a command team of subordinate commanders that are geographically located throughout that region, do fantastic work, and then the headquarters staff located at Hickam in Hawaii does fantastic work. So the men and women, they have a sense of understanding and a sense of purpose about the challenges in front of us, and I take great optimism and enthusiasm that folks are making a difference.
I mean, you mentioned the sheer magnitude of the area of responsibility. It's hard for me to wrap my head around just how big of a space that is and how difficult it must be to even get out to all of those places to see what's happening. And yet, it's not just about size and distance and geography. It's a particular theater of the globe in which, as the United States looks at what is our sort of obvious long-term competitor / potential threat, it happens in your AOR.
It does. Yeah, and by, I guess, size comparison, and I'll use this when we have visitors to the headquarters, and it's going to be tough to do without a map, but that area of responsibility in U.S. Indo-PACOM is 100 million square miles. The mainland United States is roughly 3 million square miles.
Oh my gosh.
So it's 30 plus times the size of mainland U.S. And it, to your point, because it is so spread out, because it is so diverse in terms of the challenges and what we face, and again, Alaska is different than Hawaii, than Guam, than Korea, and than Japan. So much of that rests on the commanders and the leadership teams at all levels to be able to handle things and to deal with issues and challenges at their level. I am not in a position that I can take that 5,000 to 7,000 mile screwdriver and work leadership issues individually, and it's about empowering the leaders at all levels below to handle and solve problems.
Wow, that's a great launching off place for leadership. What you said just a second ago reminded me, though, of a time I was stationed in Korea. I was the head of force protection for the Korean theater, and I sat in on at the time PACOM's big staff meeting.
Yeah, their operations and intelligence.
Yes, that's right, the O&I meeting. And I'm thinking, for 2 years, I had been invested in thinking about Korea. And so I'm thinking that surely we must take up a lot of that meeting. And I was shocked when, out of all the things, the whole Korean, my whole problem set, my whole reason for existence took up about 2 minutes of the entire O&I briefing.
I had a similar experience. I worked at PACAF headquarters about 10 years ago, and then I moved up to Camp Smith to Indo-PACOM at same meeting, at the O&I, and I'm figuring, boy, we're going to spend a lot of time on PACAF's issues and slides. It's like one slide, and it was gone in about 15 to 30 seconds, and on to the next.
It's quite humbling when you realize, okay, I see where I fit in the picture. But I mean, it truly is. Pacific Air Forces is such a critical piece of U.S. strategy writ large. And for those that, this may be getting into the weeds a little bit, but we have this strategy, this strategic idea, agile combat employment, and it's a different way of looking at the problem set. And I think it must be so critical from your perspective, because you are often receiving forces in to be able to do something in the U.S. national interest. It's so critical for those forces who come in, not only those within your command to be trained and ready and resilient, but those that you're receiving to help you do must also have those same capabilities, and yet you have no control over them.
Yeah, no direct control, but the dialogue amongst, within the Air Force leaders, I think they are clearly focused on the Indo-Pacific and what it takes to deter, to fight if needed, and win. And making sure that airmen, as they, from day one, from entering our training pipelines through home station training in other parts of the Air Force, are equipped with those skill sets that are immediately adaptable to coming out to the Indo-Pacific. If there is some sort of crisis, if there is a need for buildup of forces or use of forces at scale, General Alvin talks about this. We cannot crowdsource our way to success like we had for 30 years in the Central Command area of responsibility. We are operating in the Indo-Pacific in a contested environment, highly contested in some places. So we have to come in ready to go from the start as an all-up unit, and not build teams in place. They have to be built outside.
I think that's a great lesson for leadership at every level, from wing commander down to first level supervisor. No matter where you are, I think there's sometimes a tendency to just focus on the mission that's right in front of you, but we should always be thinking, how do I equip you while you're in this location doing this job to be able to take a skill set and go forward and be equally capable?
Agreed, and I've been guilty of that as well. Perhaps not seeing myself in the bigger picture. Can only look at maybe the next, figuratively, the next few feet in front of me, and fail to see the longer range target, if you will. And I'll say we even struggle with this in our own formations. our command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Katie McCool, tells this great story. She has 3 sons in the Air Force. One of them was participating in a large-scale exercise that had PACAF connections, and so she's talking to him and going, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm fixing airplanes." It's like, "Yeah, but why are you fixing those airplanes?" "I don't know, I'm just fixing their..." And we, even in our own formations, have to communicate, "Hey, you're participating in this exercise because it does what?" And this is the larger purpose and the larger activities that are going on. And while your task and your efforts may seem small at the time at your particular point of contact, it has a huge impact on our ability to project power and to be effective across the entirety of the theater.
Yeah, I think sometimes it seems like, I mean, I came in 1991, and I remember as a brand new second lieutenant, I would have crusty master sergeants that would say to me, "LT, why do we shouldn't have to tell you why all the time." And I hear those same, it seems like every generation there's that common occurrence that we forget that I needed to know why too.
Yeah.
And taking that extra minute, even in a daily task, to communicate, this is why this is important, this is how it connects, and just, do I even know? Do I even know how to tell you why what you're doing is important?
And a couple of units in PACAF have started to do this, and we'll continue to incorporate it and spread it. But as we go out on exercises, and whether we do them in our own bases or whether we deploy to maybe back to the mainland U.S., units will give a little card out to all their airmen to go, "Hey, we're participating in this exercise. This is the purpose, and these are the reasons why," and go from small to big, and just ending with, "This is why the Indo-Pacific is important." I mean, we're dealing with probably the most consequential competitor that we have had to deal with in decades.
World War II, potentially, or
and again, just in terms of the impact, the Indo-Pacific's importance to the United States for peace and stability and prosperity. And even not just the United States, but the entire world. So much depends on, again, the stability of this region, and that stability has been largely underwritten for the last 80 plus years of the presence of the United States military and that of its allies and partners that have enabled the other elements of plural national power to rise up from the ashes of World War II. And that is, again, challenged.
Absolutely, and I think it's hard, having grown up in the world that we live in that has benefited from that level of security and deterrence, and to begin to think about what would that be like if that was all challenged. Somebody put me onto a book called One Damned Island After Another. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's the history of 7th Air Force's island hopping campaign in World War II. And it's written by a journalist, and it's very informally written, but as I went through that, and I saw what the Army Air Force's personnel were having to overcome in order to fight against our Pacific adversary, insanely difficult.
I will have to read that, and I'm embarrassed as the PACAF commander that I've not read a book.
It's a very obscure book, so you shouldn't feel bad.
We have a very talented historian. He will find it for me, and I will read it. I read George Kenney reports recently, so from a 5th Air Force, or Far East Air Force and 5th Air Force perspective, his challenges, and 1943 and 44, and looking at some of the things that he wrote back then, it's like, man, the geography is still the same. The challenges of distance are still the same. The challenges with logistics, sustainment, commander's intent, empowering airmen at lower levels to go out there and give them purpose to understand mission, very similar. So I took a lot out of reading Kenny's internal memories of his challenges 80 plus years ago.
I mean, it really is amazing how complicated it can be. And so maybe we can pivot the conversation a little bit to how do we equip our leaders at every level to be doing something, to have a level of responsibility with less oversight than perhaps they've ever known.
Right.
And, how do we get there? And I think there's really kind of 2 components to it. I'd be interested in your thoughts, but I think one is how do I equip the person on the front lines there who's receiving that intent to go do that job? And then there's another component which I think sometimes it's easy to forget about, and it's how do I retrain the senior leaders or the higher level leadership to not have to have as much control over that situation, being comfortable with a bit more risk?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, so I wear multiple hats in this position as the Theater JFAC, Joint Force Air Component Commander, responsible for, air assets. Back to Admiral Paparo, it's a lot easier for me to transmit commanders' intent and articulate risk to airplanes, pilots, crews in the air. That is a pretty well-defined process, and for decades of air operations and combat, we have that down to a pretty good science. I'll flip on the hat to the Commander of Air Force Forces. So for all those units that are out there in the theater that are generating air power, doing the stuff on the ground to put the planes in the air, we don't necessarily have that same, directive, commander's intent, guidance that goes downhill to let the wing commanders know how much risk am I willing to accept, or do I want you to accept for base defense or force protection? When are you going to move your airplanes on your own authority, or when do I need to have a say in it because it changes my risk somewhere else along the line? And what are the things that I can have you make decisions at your level? So it's, again, two sides of my brain. One of them is on the Theater JFAC, perhaps a little bit more centrally controlled, but it's well articulated over time through an air operations directive. It's the mission generation, the generation of air power, doing all this stuff kind of out on the ground at at austere locations that step one, I need to be able to give better commander's intent. I think step two is, through the course of exercises, we wring that out. And we went through a series of exercises this summer, and we're collecting all the lessons learned to our fix problem number one that I just identified, now to transmit, okay, what are those levels of risk or those risk decisions that you are capable, that I'm comfortable being made at the lowest levels. I am not in the position, or I don't want to be in a position where I'm making decisions about R11 fuel trucks at one location or another.
Right.
The commander that's on the ground, or the master sergeant that's on the ground, the POL expert, that is the person that needs to have the authorities or the power to do it. Right. And I'd say step three is, as we exercise through this, mistakes are okay. We learn from our mistakes, and when we make mistakes or have failures that are learnable, or from which we can retrain ourselves, there's an acceptance there. There's clearly a line that we will cross when we start breaking things or injuring people. We have to be comfortable with failure.
Such a good point. You just described sort of what I see as kind of, there's two pieces of this. There's this proactive piece of it, which is, how do we get ahead of some things that we can see coming? What are some things that we can do in advance to prepare people so that we're not in pure reaction? But then there's also the very real, there's the reality of, I'm going to have to react. Yeah. So how do I equip people in the midst of reaction? How do we equip people to do that as quickly as possible? In that proactive piece of, let's just sit down and think through which things do I need to be responsible for, and where do I not need to be responsible for it, and who has it? It reminds me of just a very simple, almost analogy of, as the head security person on the base, there were some things that my wing commander needed to know, and they needed to know immediately. And there were some things that I could wait until the next morning, and rather than wake the person up in the middle of the night, I could wait till first thing in the morning. But if we didn't have that conversation, and I was just going on, I think this is within my capability, I may get that completely wrong. And just having that conversation of, these are the types of things I need to know, and I need to give you the green light on. These are the areas you can run with on your own. Makes such a difference in giving people the confidence to then move out.
Yeah. in a, I don't know, a related, perhaps unrelated war story or exercise story, where, visiting a unit that was doing an exercise in an austere location, last year, and again, Agile combat employment, so their minimum personnel, minimum equipment. One of their pieces of equipment, which happened to be a jack, broke. At the lower levels within maintenance, there was a decision to go, hey, we will execute a tire change on an F-22 without a jack. And they figured out a solution to do that. And they showed it to me while it was in progress, which was fascinating to see the creativity and the ingenuity that came about. And I'm looking at that going, okay, that is risk that I'm comfortable with, with a master sergeant, taking and making that decision, or talking to the senior master sergeant, who may have been the highest ranking person on the flight line. That does not need to come up my direction. But for me, for Agile combat employment, it's, man, I'm always impressed with the ingenuity and innovation of our airmen. And for us to be effective in a highly contested environment, we have got to be able to operate fast. We can't be going all the way back up, seeking permissions for everything. Some things, yes, but as many decisions as we can put down to the lowest level that speeds up, our operations and our generation, makes us more effective. And I look at, the authoritarian regimes that are potential, challenges to the peace and security in the Indo-Pacific, how they centralize command and control at the highest level, which makes them less effective.
Less effective, less agile.
Yeah, and I don't want us to get, go that. There are some things that we will have to consolidate decisions and authorities at a high level for all the right reasons, but as many as can be pushed down to lower level leaders is critical.
I think what you're saying from the senior most level is that you're intentionally thinking through, how do I create a culture where people feel empowered within the degree that you've laid out that they have, that they're empowered then to go off and make decisions. How critical is it, do you think, that senior, at whatever level that is, the senior person there is helping to foster that sort of a culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say the senior leader, whoever it is, or the commander, is really ultimately responsible for the culture of that organization, the morale of that organization, and the effectiveness. And I have been in units when the commanders have encouraged and really pushed us and allowed us to learn. And the cost of learning is sometimes making mistakes. Have been in units where mistakes were far less tolerated, and it makes you a little bit more conservative and unwilling to push the boundaries, and slows down your learning.
I mean, right now we're trying to figure out how do we speed up learning. Yeah. And like you say, there's a line. There's a line you don't want to cross when it comes to the safety of people or missions, et cetera. But having the freedom of action within a left and right boundary is so critical.
Yeah, and not to get off on a sidetrack here, it is a fine line, and sometimes there's that attitude about, hey, we've got to move fast, and rules, regulations, instructions be damned, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to figure this out. And I caution against that sort of mindset. Sure. Those things that are written in black and white sometimes are written in blood. So before you, and I'll steal wisdom from another commander, and I think it was Tony Bauernfein, but before you deviate from the instruction, you need to know what the instruction says in the first place. And then be able to come back to go, hey boss, I am not going to apply paragraph 2 of this particular because of such reasons. And I think just the knowledge and the foundational knowledge of why we do things has to be part of the process and the foundation. Before you deviate from the norm, you have to understand the risks that go along with that.
Man, that's such a good lesson for younger leaders. I go around the world teaching these leader development workshops, and we've engaged wing commanders down to first level supervisors, staff sergeants, and civilians, and I mean, we've kind of crossed the spectrum, and I find that many problems that people are having with regards to leadership, regardless of what your context, there's kind of the same problem. One of those problems or challenges is I need to convey something up my chain. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure how to do it. It's something they desperately need to hear, but I'm worried they're not gonna receive it. One of the things I think you just mentioned is such a great piece of wisdom is most bosses want to be successful.
Yeah.
And if you've got a good idea that helps them be more successful, generally speaking, there's a good chance you can win that conversation. But it's about how you package it. Yeah. And sometimes, and I think what I just heard you say is that by communicating to your boss, this is the limiting factor that we have. This is my recommendation for deviating from the norm, and this is the risk you take in doing it.
Yeah.
That gives the boss the full picture, and now the boss feels more comfortable with making the decision because they understand the parameter.
And it's happened, I think, to all of us that we will sometimes only get a part of that story as it comes up the hill, and things are only sold as good news, and you don't necessarily get the views of others or the risk piece that goes along with that. And I much rather get the holistic picture and understand, all right, this is a great idea. Thank you for articulating the risks. I know what I'm buying now, or I know what I'm endorsing here, and it just makes me more comfortable as a senior leader, someone a little bit higher on the chain. You never want to take an idea from down below, endorse it, push it up, and then go, shoot, yeah. Oh, by the way,
should have asked that question.
Yeah. Right. As somebody else figures out the risks that you were perhaps blind to.
Right. How do you, as the PACAF commander, you kind of have the role of creating that culture where feedback up is welcome? Yeah. And by you conveying it at the highest levels, hopefully that then works its way down the chain of command. Do you have any techniques for how you encourage the people sitting around the table to be able to offer you advice, or maybe perhaps give feedback that isn't necessarily where you were leaning?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. I've heard this from other bosses, and I tried to repeat it when I came into the job, and I hope it's true, but I say, I am not a micromanager, but I want to be micro-informed. So please, don't be afraid to send me stuff on email. I will let you know to throttle it down. I have never told anyone to throttle it down. With that comes a commitment to reading what people send, and I do endeavor to respond to every email that hits my inbox, and I try to do it in a timely manner. I am not 100% successful. There are a couple of commanders that will attest to that. And not only do I read what they sent in the email, I will also include the attachments just to show that, and come back to them with some reference to go, hey, I did spend time and attention, just showing that I am committed to taking the information that they had pushed up my way. As it applies to meetings itself, I've learned the hard way to be careful to show my cards and to show my opinions and biases too early. So to encourage dialogue, I really do try to seek others' opinions. And it's taken me a while to do this. I will call people out in meetings, and sometimes you can read the body language of others sitting around the table, and if people are tensing up, or the eye movement just isn't giving you the warm fuzzy, it's right. Like, hey, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And be careful about passing judgment. And if you can start to tease out that there are frictions or differing opinions, just to have the patience to hold off on making a decision right now, to go, okay, hey, why don't you guys work through this a little bit more, figure out, I'm good with 80% of it, I need refinement on this last 20, and then bring it to me offline.
I really like that, because I've heard people, the fact that you are committed to answering every email to me is amazing to begin with. I'm not nearly as busy as you, and I bet I have 14,000 unread emails on my phone right now. So I am amazed at your commitment to do that. But it communicates, I'm going to send the boss something. and it's going to be read.
Yeah.
Therefore, he must value what I have to say.
Yeah.
But then this other piece of, can I tease out, are there frictions? Is there more that needs to be discussed here? Not that you need to be involved in the sausage making of what that answer ends up being, but pushing it back and say, hey, you guys need to talk more about this and come back to me is a good use of your time while still ensuring that you're getting the best possible recommendation.
Yeah, and I think there's a humility piece of it as well. That I grew up in the Air Force, doing a certain number of things, and I have some knowledge in certain areas. I have to tell myself that knowledge is stale, and I'm not as smart on issue A as the person that's sitting over here, and I have to be careful about turning myself into an action officer or, giving up some of my command responsibilities by getting a little bit too far into the weeds. I have a lot of flaws as a leader and a commander. Coming down and being an action officer is one of them at times, and it's a hard thing to go, all right, I'm going to let the subject matter experts wrestle this one out, and I will preserve myself, my decision space, for only those things that the commander can do or should do.
Man, that's good. In fact, I heard somebody say what you were just saying in terms of do what only I can do, delegate anything else that I can, and then delete the things that are not really applicable to me at all. And I find that in each of those areas, there are tripwires that happen with all leaders. There's a tendency for us as we move up to be comfortable at the level we were previously in.
Yeah, and I tell this to, we have a squadron, 3 times a year we bring in our new squadron commanders, and we have a squadron commander level leadership course, and that's, I struggled in squadron command because of that reason. I mean, I was grew up flying airplanes, line instructor pilot, weapons officer, squadron DO, and then making the transition to squadron command. I couldn't stop being any of the other jobs that I had mentioned before. I mean, that the squadron needed a commander more than they needed a second DO throwing pucks in the scheduling office, more than they needed another IP, thinking he was the weapons officer, et cetera. So it took me a while to learn that lesson. Unfortunately, I have tried not to repeat it in other command opportunities.
I mean, I think it's a tendency. It's just something that we all struggle with, and I appreciate the fact that you bring it out, because I think it is something that as we move up, whether you're the staff sergeant that's now a tech sergeant and your primary job isn't supervising, airmen, it's supervising supervisors.
Right.
The tendency is I want to go supervise the airmen again, or squadron commander wanting to be a flight commander again, or group commander really wanting to be in that squadron that I'm comfortable with. That's a tendency. And there's only one person who can do the job of the commander. A lot of people can do those other jobs, but only one person can do those things. And I think it's worth writing down, what is my role and how do I stay within my lane?
Yeah, and another lesson that I learned along the way, and I don't do this at all levels, but one of the things that helped me in a couple of jobs was receiving an expectation letter from my boss. And to be honest, the first time it happened was wing command at Shepherd, and I walked off the stage. I had just taken the flag of the 80th, and the 19th Air Force commander, my new boss, who had just handed me the flag, we get to the bottom of the stairs, he turns around, he reaches into his service dress coat pocket, pulls out an envelope and hands it to me with my expectation letter. And at first I'm like, whoa, I didn't know what to do. I was incredibly helpful because I kept it on my desk, and I knew what he needed from me, and it was really clear. So I do the same with numbered Air Force commanders. I do the same with the directors and the staff. I do not go down to the wing command level. I let the numbered Air Force commanders do that, but it is something picked up along the way and seen others use, and I found that helpful. I received one from General Alvin when I took command back in February of 2024. I keep it on my desk. I socialize it with the staff, and just to let people know, this is the grade sheet that I am focused on, and it gives, I think, a little bit of insight in terms of what is important to me or how my mental processes are going.
So that's such a great idea. I don't know why we don't do that all the time.
Yes, I don't either, and I also look with us as a service sometimes struggling with documented feedback, and being considerably older than you or entering the Air Force well before you did, and I've watched us go through, evolutions of performance feedback reports, and I think we're better now than we were a few years ago, but we don't do a good job, or as good a job as we can on the feedback to subordinates to go, and part of that's expectations in the first place. Hey, here's what I need from you. And when expectations are met, great. When expectations are not met, hey, here's the course correction that needs to be applied now.
I agree. I think I often say that the two most important words for good leadership is to be intentional.
Yep.
And to apply that intentionality to individual people.
Yeah.
Staff Sergeant X is different than Staff Sergeant Y, and I need to lead them differently because they're two different people. But what you just mentioned in laying out a letter or setting out a set of written expectations forces that leader to be very intentional. Yeah. I am deliberately writing down what I am expecting, an individual of you. Yes. And that now sets out, this is my report card, as you said. Yeah. There should be no surprises if you're giving feedback along the way of how they're doing in those areas. There should be no surprises at the end of that rating period. How am I doing?
Yeah. And again, it's specific to the job or to the objectives of the job, either the command or the directorate. There's a lot more to it, I think, in terms of accountability and feedback. Sure. As well that cannot be encapsulated in a 2-page letter. But it's a starting point for conversation.
You're at least thinking about it and being deliberate, and the person starts with something. Right. So much of the time, the opposite of intentionality is assumption or by accident. Mm-hmm. I think back on, the 31 years I was in, and so much of my leadership was either by assumption or accident. Yeah. I just assumed I was doing it because things seemed to be going okay.
Very similar. Yep. And again, squadron command, the assumption I was doing well until I got direct feedback that I wasn't, and that was a bit of a shock to the system. Mm-hmm. And the feedback was absolutely valid, and it was spot on. But yeah, I had been running under some faulty assumptions from the start, and it took a bit of a course correction to get me back on track.
Mm. I want to pivot one more time. You mentioned your command chief, yeah. Chief McCool. Yep. It's wonderful to hear how even at the most senior levels, that command chief relationship and partnership is still as critical as it was for me as a squadron commander with my SEL. How do you do that? What's the key to forging a partnership like that that's really synergistic and effective?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll deviate from the question a little bit. You may have to remind me of the question as I wander. Yeah, when I grew up in the Air Force, at the Air Force Academy, I had very little interaction with enlisted. Right. I remember 2 enlisted from my time at the Air Force Academy. They were both of my TAC NCOs, one at the basic NCO course at Fort Carson, Sergeant First Class Thompson, one at the Jungle Warfare Training School in Fort Sherman, Panama, Sergeant First Class Simeone. I do not remember the name of any other enlisted leaders while I was at the Air Force Academy, because that was how little interaction that we had. Right. And then when I, growing up as a F-16 pilot on the flight line, interacted with the pro supers and some of the other maintenance personnel. But I was a major in the United States Air Force before I think I had my first serious interaction and education with the enlisted community, and it was Jeff Cooey. He was a master sergeant at the time.
I know him.
Yeah.
I know Jeff Cooey.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, fantastic guy, and we both worked in an office in the Pentagon, and he was one of all the people, officers are enlisted, he probably had one of the greatest influences on me as a leader. And he didn't, I think Patton is the author of this quote, an officer is always on parade. Jeff didn't quite quote that back to me, but he highlighted, he goes, you are always being watched, and the enlisted force needs to hear from you. They need to see that you're doing right, and they need to know that you're listening to them. Mm. And great advice. Yeah, and again, it was me as an officer, had a small group of enlisted on that team. We spent a lot of time together, and he highlighted that, hey, it's all about mission success, it's all about team success, and everybody needs to understand that and kind of subject themselves to the good of the team. And I really appreciate his wisdom and counsel.
That's great. It doesn't surprise. I also feel very strongly about his leadership capability. I think.
Which means I forgot your original question.
Well, no, that's okay, because I'm gonna take what you just said and I'm gonna go back to that original question, which is, our enlisted force is amazing. I mean, I wouldn't have made it 2 years without an amazing enlisted force that literally helped me grow up as just an adult, much less a good officer. I was fortunate in I recognized how ignorant I was, and so I was dependent immediately on, please help me be successful. But at whatever level, whether you're a second lieutenant when that happens, whether you're a major when that happens, what advice would you give for officers in receiving mentorship from people who technically are our subordinates?
Yeah. I remembered your previous question. I will try to get back to it, but yeah, I'd say, again, there's a humility piece that goes along with it, and understanding that you are part of a team. It is not about you, and that the people that are giving you feedback are doing it to better you in order to make the team better, and that it would be wise to listen to them. And while they may be junior in rank, just based on the pay scales and pay structure, they probably have the wisdom of experience of being around and knowing how things work. So again, I think there's, just understanding that, people are not out there to take you down or to cut you down to size, but actually, helping to shape, influence, and mold you to be an effective leader, and to understand what it takes to be, a more effective part of the team.
Yeah, I think sometimes an NCO or senior NCO might give feedback, and they may not deliver it perhaps in the best way, but even in that, short of something that's just outright, out of line, if you can see beyond what the words and get at how can I use this to make myself better? I think that's such a great thank you for the input, because oftentimes people won't give you the input.
Yeah, and I do agree. It's a two-way street to go, hey, I appreciate the feedback. I will endeavor to make those changes, and if I could, here's how I best take advice and your counsel. If the rheostat was down at 6, I'd take it a little bit better than if the rheostat was up at 11.
Yes. Sometimes I deserved the very. I mean, how many times did I remember? Hey, LT, let's go take a ride. Yeah. And that was always like, okay, get out my notebook and prepare to copy, because I'm about to get real wisdom. Yeah. And I appreciated that. But other times it was just, I think there was an immaturity on their part. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But if you've established yourself as a team player, and we've got each other's, we're trying to advance us as a team, then you can even accept comments sometimes that maybe not delivered the right way, but had the right intent, and you can do something positive with that too.
Yeah, one of my obsessive compulsive behaviors is kind of replaying the things that I have said during the course of the day, and I look back onto the feedback and things that I have uttered to others and go, I probably could have said that a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So I don't think if there are perfect communicators out there probably aren't, but some do better than others. Your earlier question about the command chief, Katie McCool, mm-hmm. Among her many talents and skills is she has a different background than I do. And the fact I grew up fairly stovepiped in one part of the operational community, and I tend to keep my aperture fairly narrow, and she is really effective. One, because her understanding of the larger Air Force is pretty broad based on her experiences, and she's also pretty good at taking me and kind of figuratively pulling my face out of the whiteboard and understanding. I will easily settle into mission all the time, and she'll help me understand the human weapon system, probably the most critical one that we have out there, and that requires, care, feeding, and attention, quality of life issues, as well as, leadership issues. So again, she's really fantastic, and again, helping me. It's we kid when we've done things like this where the two of us have been interviewed, and we'll get the feedback, or we'll look at the websites afterwards on our interviews, and she gets all the, deservedly so, gets all the high praise, and I'll send her a note. It's like, so the real story is command chief makes commander look bad because she's so talented.
Well, next time I'll need to have her in here to add on. Just
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you smoked out my intent. I'm trying to get her to do one of these.
I'd love to have her. I'd love to have her come. I've actually heard wonderful things about her from other sources as well. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I wonder, and I may be completely wrong. I was never a pilot, never a fighter pilot. But
too smart for that.
Well, you forget I'm a defender. So I wonder, and I often think about when we talk about feedback and we talk about partnership and the NCO officer relationship. One of the perhaps, I won't say downside, but maybe a challenge that comes with growing up in the fighter community is that you are very singly focused early on, and I've got to learn this weapon system, and you are really striving to be the best technician you can be in that aircraft, with good reason. But one of the things I really value about your culture is this culture of a debrief.
Yeah.
Where you can walk in after a flight, you essentially take off the rank long enough to, we're going to talk about whatever needs to be talked about. And it doesn't matter if I'm the highest ranking person in the room, anybody that's got something to say has the freedom and almost the expectation that you will say it.
Yeah.
And then when we go out, we're back, we're back in our roles, and people are mature enough to kind of figure out how that works. But it invites a culture of really candid feedback. And I don't think the rest of the Air Force has the benefit of kind of growing up, receiving that sort of unvarnished feedback and knowing this is to make us all better. Do you think that was a helpful part of your upbringing? Just having that sort of like abrasive, perhaps, like, oh man, I really got called out in a brutal way?
In many ways it did, because whether the feedback was given to me or not, I think it developed within me just a sense of personal accountability and to the point where I even see it today that, I mean, I'll see pilots fessing up to things that nobody else saw in the flight. Either wasn't on their tape, or we didn't look at the tapes. They'll just go, hey, I was 5 knots fast coming off at this point, and I busted this altitude. Nobody would have known, but I think that's helpful that there's that constant drive to weed out errors and to hold yourself accountable to the highest standard. So I do see value in that. In terms of direct application, I think that becomes the hard part, because in other career fields, in the flying community, again, you go into that debrief room and you debrief.
You can create a specific environment to have that conversation.
And I'm not smart enough, I guess, to know within other career fields in the Air Force, how to necessarily implement that on a daily, not weekly basis, but it has to be routine, I think, and I think that's what again makes Western Air Forces, the United States military, as good as they are, especially our flying communities, that is part of our nature. That honest, open debrief.
I agree with you. I think just thinking about my growing up, would a debrief have been possible? Not necessarily. However, I think most of us learn leadership by the type of leadership we received.
Yeah.
we see a picture, we see a pattern, and for whatever reason, that kind of becomes part of the collage that we put together. Is this is my version of leadership?
Yeah, whether good or bad.
Whether good or bad, exactly right. And having a culture where you get comfortable with my boss, or people have the ability to come and tell me this is something that could have done better.
Yeah.
You need to make that better. I have the ability to share that same sort of a feedback. Because I want us to be better, not because I'm putting you down, et cetera. That becomes part of this is what right looks like to me, and now I'm able to do that much more comfortably as I grow into leadership. But if you never experience that, having candid conversations with people about areas they could improve feels very awkward, and sometimes it feels mean or it feels critical, when in reality, hey, I just want us to be better. I think that's more that what I'm talking about is taking the output of the debrief and figuring out how to incorporate it in my role. So Chief McCool brings to you aspects that basically broaden your awareness, open up your perspective about things that you wouldn't necessarily gravitate to.
Correct. And again, part of it was my personal development through the Air Force. Growing up, in the fighter community. For a long period of time, and then some of my leadership opportunities at Wing Command at Shepherd was a small wing, and it was more pilots than it was anything else. So it was
and really good pilots.
Yeah, good looking and talented.
Yes, good looking, talented pilots.
And we were a tenant on somebody else's base, so didn't have to deal with some of the the mission support group or the med group, et cetera. And our maintenance was contract, so it was just a oversized. It was a big ops group, and I had there were vice wing command opportunities along the way, which were one of them, a vice wing command opportunity along the way, which is also in a tenant. So I didn't necessarily have interaction with parts of a normal Air Force wing that had lots of enlisted or had the other career fields. And it wasn't until I got to Al Dhafra as a one-star wing commander, and now it's, whoa, all right, we've got 3,500 airmen on this location. We're also operating out of 4 other locations in 4 different countries. For me, it's like, boy, I've gotten this far in my career, and there's a whole part of the United States Air Force that I'm not really smart on, and I am now responsible for. And it made me realize the gaps in my swing. And to be honest, one of the people that helped me out on that, or at least forced me, was the ops group commander, who goes, I don't need a second ops group commander. I need you, boss, I need you focused on the other parts of on this wing. And he had known me for years, which was, again, helpful wisdom to get me to broaden my horizons. Yeah, I tell you, and just being here in AFA, you run into everybody. I ran into one of my best friend in high school.
Is that right?
Yeah, and people that have known me from the academy, and then every stop in between. But invariably, someone will come up to me and go, "Hey, I remember when you said this to me," and I'm like going, "The last time we saw each other was 15 years ago, and you can remember." I can't remember what I said 15 minutes ago, and they can remember an interaction from 15 years. But yeah, words are powerful. You can never tell what sticks or hangs with people and what will have an influence on their life.
Well, if it's any, I guess I'm going to brag for 1 second. We've just met, but when I was talking to somebody that I greatly respect, who has been in the Air Force a long time, and I said, I'm excited I get the opportunity to podcast with General Schneider. The word that came back was, in my career, there's only been 3 people I knew from the first time I met them that they were going to be a general officer, and General Schneider's one of them. So I don't know, like you've conveyed that there was a lot you had to learn, but you've obviously been pretty squared away right from the beginning, or at least really good at conveying that you were squared away.
I will give one of my first squadron commanders due credit. It was at the time he was a lieutenant colonel, Gary Schmidt. And we were having one-on-one dialogue in his office for reasons that you can probably imagine. And the thing that he said to me, he goes, you've got a lot to offer, and you got a lot of talent. He goes, you're going in the wrong direction. And those words hit me hard, because I thought I was doing everything that a first lieutenant in Korea in a fighter squadron needed to do. I was not. And Gary Schmidt's words, I think, made me realize that I was on the wrong path. So I'm grateful for the second, third, fourth chances that he gave me to course correct at that point. So I did not get here by good looks, skill, and talent. I had a lot of leaders, supervisors, peers, subordinates especially, enable this today. Some of them opened the door for me. Some of them threw me through the door, or had a boot on the end of it. Right. But I had a lot of help.
That's a great story. I mean, you mentioned seeing somebody from 15 years ago who remembered a specific word. Yeah. You just conveyed to me somebody from your time as a first lieutenant who shared something with you that really changed the course of your life. And
no, it was also 15 years ago.
Right, of course. You've really moved fast.
Yeah. No, that was 1991.
A great year, by the way. Yeah. So I really appreciate this conversation. I'm amazed that you've taken the time to share with me, and I think there's so much wisdom through here that if people will listen and begin to really think through, how do I take a lesson from somebody who's been very successful, who is very successful, but who has been very transparent about things that they wish they'd done different, or ways that they wish they had delved a little bit deeper earlier, can really make an amazing difference, not only in their own careers, but within the lives of the people that they work with. So General Schneider, I'm grateful. Thank you again for taking the time to sit down with me here. All right, sir.
It was an honor. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for listening to Building Better Leaders. If you'd like to learn more about the Doolittle Leadership Center or the Leader Development Workshops we deliver all around the world, please visit us at afa.org/DLC. Helping you become a better leader is our passion and our purpose.